Joshua.
Hey, how's it going? How's it going? It's good to be
Um,
here. Thank you for having me.
oh my gosh, I'm so excited. So, you guys, Joshua is actually my fiance, soon to be husband. And for those of you tuning in who've been on this fun journey with us the last couple of years, I've had the honor and the privilege of hosting a number of guests and powerful, powerful stories of the way that God has redeemed their lives and worked through their stories, just to point back to the hope and the faithfulness of Him and how He never gives up and He always pursues our hearts. And I just so believe that Joshua's and my story of how we met is encouragement for hopefully not just a couple of people, but a number of people. And we're just excited to share how we met and how we totally didn't do anything traditionally, but just excited to share it. So do you want to start with the hailstorm?
Yeah, so I own a roofing company here in Parker, Colorado. We kind of focused on hail restoration. So when a weather event like a windstorm or a hailstorm comes through the area, damages people's homes, we kind of mobilize, go out there, represent them to their insurance company, and help them fix the damages.
Wow.
So there was a huge hailstorm last year, and it affected quite a lot of people here in the Front Range. And it just so happened to hail in Evergreen, Colorado, which to my knowledge, that's so close to the foothills. I've never even heard of hail happening out there. It usually happens further, like towards Aurora or Denver.
Wow. Like in the flat, like the plains.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Okay. So what's funny is that this is like the beginning of August. Well, the storms were all like June and July because that's heavy hail season. So the beginning of August, it's a Saturday morning and I'm on a Zoom call for another ministry that happens to be in Switzerland, out of all places, which is so random. And I miss a phone call, a text message, probably several text messages, and a voice memo. It's like every opportunity. And then like maybe an email or something on Saturday morning from my wonderful and beautiful mentor. Her name is Charla. Just love her dearly. And the connection there is that Charla needed her roof done because of a hailstorm that had just destroyed their roof. And I don't think she really wanted to wait any longer than she had already waited to get her roof done. And she put in a call. So you want to pick up from there?
Yeah. So a friend of mine, Kurt, he actually is the facility manager at Red Rocks Church, Hart Meadows. And he owns a painting company, and he was doing some painting work for Charla at the time. And he told me, he said, hey, I have this client. She's a really sweet lady. She was affected by the hailstorm in Evergreen, and she had a roofing company, and they've just kind of quit communicating. Would you mind helping her out? So I was like, yeah, absolutely. So for some reason, usually, as an owner, I'm kind of stuck to the office a lot. But for some reason, I just felt like I needed to take this appointment myself. It was a Saturday morning, beautiful Saturday morning. And I was like, that'll be a nice trip up to the foothills and kind of get on a roof. Hadn't been on one in a minute. So drove over there, met with Charla, did my inspection like I always do. Kind of was going to get ready to tell her about my company and what I found out on my inspection. And she just stops me like right in the middle of my spill. And she's like, we're going to need to put this roofing stuff aside for a minute. And I was like, okay. I didn't know if I was in trouble or what. And she goes on to mention this beautiful girl, Wendy, that she knows. She first qualified and made sure I wasn't married. And I said I wasn't. And she started talking about this girl, Wendy, and told me about her heart for the Lord. She's an entrepreneur. She's beautiful. She's into fitness. And just spoke so highly of her. She was like, can I show you some pictures of her? And I was like, well, yeah, of course. Kind of in the back of my mind, you always, as a single middle-aged man, people are always trying to connect you with somebody. So I wasn't very hopeful at all. But she showed me a picture. And I was like, wow, she's beautiful. Yeah, absolutely. Let's try to connect.
That's really sweet. Which it's so funny because anybody that knows Charlotte knows she has a prayer book that she goes through pretty much on a daily basis. And I've just had the honor of doing life with her for the last, 15 years. And she's like a big sister, an aunt, just a dear friend and mentor to me. And I know that she's been there in my singleness and really over the last 10 years has really just prayed with me consistently of God, we don't know where my person is. We don't know where Wendy's future husband is, but Lord, would you bring him along? And Joshua knows this. I'm just telling you as listeners to kind of fill you in. I had been through seasons where I was like, God, do I need to prepare my heart to be single the rest of my life?
Yeah.
And not feeling the call to be single. I was still attracted to people. And I was like, we joked that. So after Joshua and I met, a girlfriend and I went to Europe for a couple weeks, and everybody had told me going through Italy as two blonde Americans, like everybody, including grandpas, are going to hit on you. And like, there's no chance that people are going to want to keep you like there. Well, you guys, we didn't, not to be like, oh, we didn't get hit on, but literally no one talked to us like pretty American girls.
Yeah, I might have had something to do with that.
So I just remember seasons of texting Charla and calling her and just being like, can you pray for my heart? Because I'm weary. And I don't know why God is delaying. And I don't really understand what waiting this long has to do with like my story and trying to be faithful in the midst of like some of the hardest seasons of my life. And most of you that have listened, I've alluded a couple of times to having dated an addict or two in the past. And my last relationship had ended actually in 2016. So that was a minute ago. That wasn't just like yesterday. And he was addicted to pornography and full blown, like I thought he was in recovery and he wasn't. And that just like, that crushed me. And at the same time, I kind of made this deal like, okay, I'm not going to online date. And that was back in 2016. And I was like, I refuse to online date. Not that there's anything wrong with online dating for people that meet that way. I just knew that that's not how I was going to meet my person.
Yeah.
So then you fast forward 7 years and I'm going, well, God, maybe I'll be single forever. Charla, we go back to that story. She calls me, texts me, sends me voice memos, all of these things while Joshua is at her house.
She was very persistent. Yeah.
And then so I get these voice memos and she's just like, I met the sweetest man today. And she's like, and I kept her voice memo. I'll play it for you sometime. Mm-hmm. She was just like, you just have to trust me. He's the sweetest man. He has the kindest eyes. And she was like, and we were supposed to talk about my roof, which we did, but majority of our conversation was me trying to encourage him to meet you. And by God's grace, she convinced me. And I was like, all right, let's put us in touch. So it took us 3 weeks to actually get together.
Sure did. Yeah. And I like what you said about the online dating. Actually, my story's a little bit different. I was married for 14 years. And so went through a really pretty nasty divorce, a huge custody battle. That was back in 20 and 21. And I tried the online dating and I was just like, oh my goodness, this is nuts. Especially if you're really trying to follow Jesus, like if you really have a heart for him and you want to live your life for him, even on the Christian dating sites, people are not who they say they are. It was a terrible experience for me as well on the online dating. I mean, people using pictures that are 10 years old. You're like, did you not think I was going to meet you or what? But I came to that same resolution. I actually decided, God, I don't know what you have for me, but I'm not going to compromise. I'm not going to merge my life with somebody who doesn't have the same passion for you that I do. And I came to the same resolution. I was like, I hadn't went on a date for 15 months when we met. And I was just kind of like, I'm just going to set this to the side. I'm going to focus on the Lord. I'm going to focus on building my business. And if God's got it for me, he's going to have to bring it to me. And boy, did he.
Gosh, I think about how it took us like 3 weeks to connect. And at the same time, you're talking to, we had texted a few times about getting together and maybe meeting at Red Rocks or potentially the church I was attending, LifeGate, which shout out to both of them. Oh, yeah. We love LifeGate.
Great churches. Yeah.
And Red Rocks. And we had talked about meeting several times, but it's like something kept coming up. And now in hindsight, we look back going, was that us protecting our hearts? Was it like one of the days we were supposed to connect and I had a very important meeting with a client that happened to call me an hour late. And I'm like on the phone with the president of this company going, I cannot like skip this meeting or call. And at the same time going, but I'm supposed to meet Joshua right now for coffee. And it just, is like the perfect storms of not working out. But when we finally did meet, I think we decided it was August 24th.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we met at Starbucks off of Arapahoe, kind of by Torchy's Tacos.
Yeah. And I had just recorded another podcast that day. So I was like all done up, had way too much makeup on.
Well, I don't know. When you got out of your car, I was in the parking lot. I'd moved there a little bit early and I saw her pull up and I'd seen her picture, but she got out of the car and she walked over to her passenger door. And I was like, okay, God, yeah, this is good. And if you guys have met Wendy in person, you already know this, but she just sparkles. It is like she is like a diamond or something. She shines with Jesus. And of course, she's just a knockout. She's beautiful. So when I saw her for the first time, I was like, oh, yeah, this is good. This is good.
It's like one of those things, God. I remember I noticed the shoes he was wearing and was like, oh, this guy has style. Okay, so we meet at Starbucks and we were joking about this offline earlier this morning. Like we literally broke every rule of our first date. Like,
yeah, I basically got interrogated.
Guys. No, that's not true. But we talked about previous relationships. We did talk a little bit about politics, which we're not going to go into with you guys. We talked about religion. We talked about just places where hope was deferred and how much we didn't want to do online dating. And I don't know, I feel like the time went super fast. And then 2 hours later, we were like,
I thought it was really good though, because what I got out of it for you was you knew what you wanted and you were not going to compromise either. And some of the things that you asked me were very direct. And I was very thankful I could look you in the eyes and say, no, that's not something that I struggle with. But I walked away from that saying, this woman knows what she wants and she's not going to compromise. And I was similar, I was exactly the same actually. And so that really stuck out to me.
Oh, that's sweet. Well, I had told him about the relationship that I had just told you guys about. And in so many words, I don't know that I was like, hey, do you struggle with porn?
That's how I remember it.
But I basically was just like, I saw this not only rip apart the relationship I was in, but I fought against trafficking and did all these events for 4 years and just really talked about like my call to ministry and wanting to be a voice for the voiceless. And one of the things that God highlighted in my time getting to know Joshua for the very first time was, so you guys, people that know me know I'm not an early bird, but like once I'm awake, I tend to be like, I could be a morning or a night person, but I don't prefer to get up in the wee early morning hours. So the first time I met Joshua, he's talking about how he gets up at like 4:30 or 5 a.m. And I'm thinking, oh no, like, cause I like stay up late. But all jokes aside, he had mentioned that he was getting up that early just because he had to spend time with the Lord.
Yeah.
And you just talked about, at this point, you didn't share your full story with me, but you had alluded to it just being a really, really hard last 4 years.
Yeah.
And if you didn't have God breathe on every single day, that you wouldn't be able to make it through. And I just remember like that is something that I've prayed for 20 years, to have a person that I could read God's word with and next to and pray with in the mornings, and to be able to text when I needed prayer or call in a moment of like desperation to be like, let's seek God's face together. And that's something that God really highlighted to me about you, is your morning routine was not something that you're like, oh, I go to church on Sundays and then I sometimes pick up my Bible. You're like, no, this is like the air I breathe.
It is. Yeah, it's so sacred. If anyone out there that's listening to this has walked through the fire, walked through the refining fire and been in a season of pruning, and just where it's just hard, right? It's just hard. That gift of desperation is something special, actually. You don't always like what's getting you to that point, but the way that you connect with God in the middle of that is not like a traditional Sunday morning Christian. He becomes your oxygen. And you know that if I don't spend time with him, if he doesn't breathe on me, if I don't meet with him and have him encourage me and assure me and give me strength and hope, I'm not going to make it through the day.
Yeah.
And it's actually a beautiful thing.
Yeah. I don't love the gift of desperation, like what you just said, but in moments of breakthrough and worship, it's like you and I talk about Psalms a lot, about how David like cries out saying like, God, where are you? Why have you forsaken me? And I talk about that with another podcast guest on another episode of like the Psalm 22 is David's, you forsaken me, God.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then Psalm 23 is him walking through the valley of shadow of death and talking about how his rod and his staff, like God is our shepherd, is the one that like leads us and guides us along still waters. And like when you get to experience this depth of worship and then be like, at the beginning, be like, God, where are you? And like, my life is falling apart. Yeah. And that's how we feel many times in the morning when we're like, yesterday was hard, God, would you speak to me again? And then by the end of our quiet time, whether it's 15 minutes or an hour or 2 hours, depending on what you need, when you can walk away feeling like God spoke to me, he gave me a word, or worship led me to a place of surrender and my heart is encouraged. Like
it's huge. Yeah. So to have the creator, the king of everything who breathes galaxies, to have him step down and meet with you. It's amazing. It's like David said, what is man that you're mindful of him? It's an incredible experience.
Yeah. So how much time do you guys have? Just kidding. So that was date one. Obviously, there was a lot of in-betweens. We talked about the fact that we both love to snowboard and we both love adventure and we love the ocean and the sunshine and just so many things that we have in common, from lifting weights and working out to just our heart for worship and our heart for people and seeing God get the glory. And then we're like, okay, let's do date number 2. And I was like, okay, by the way, I'm going to Europe in 3 days.
Yeah, it seemed like every time I'd meet with you, you'd leave for like an extended period of time.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So I went to Europe for 2 weeks with a girlfriend, and it was a long awaited trip. I had really wanted to go to this retreat center in Wales called Val de Brennan, which I can't wait to bring Joshua back to, and really feel like I had an encounter with the Lord there. And then, I had talked about Italy and we had a wonderful time.
It's been a dream of mine to go to Italy. My grandmother on my mom's side is full-blooded Italian, so I've always wanted to go to Italy. So I was living vicariously through you. Yeah.
And I was like texting him like pictures of the sunset, and just God allowed, I think he allowed that separation of so much of my travels so that we could really get to know each other through text communication and through phone calls and through messages, obviously, when I was over, in another country. But then I came back and we had date number 2, and then I went out of town, and then we had date number 3, and then I went out of town. And it's not because I just wanted to like gallivant and run around the country. It's because I literally had work in Texas, and then I had work in Washington, D.C., and then I was in Florida visiting friends. But God would allow us to connect. I remember going to church with you and meeting some of your colleagues and friends. And then at one point being like, well, I still want to hear more of your story. And I think you and I talked about that's when we did that hike.
Yeah.
And so we got together for like, literally, it was like an hour and a half.
Yeah.
But we did this hike together around this beautiful, like around sunset, but where you could see the entire Front Range, and it's usually gorgeous, and it was good weather. And this is the end of September. So this is like date number 3 or 4, and we go on this hike. And I think I had just alluded, like, I really am enjoying getting to know you, but I know there's more of a story and whatever you want to share. And I feel like in that time, he opened up in such a way that was challenging and hard.
It was.
And I remember thinking, gosh, this is actually perfect that we're hiking, because we didn't have to have like straight eye to eye I would look over and Joshua would have a tear rolling down his face and yet still could like keep your composure because we were walking next to each other as opposed to like, let me just roll it all out.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was very difficult. And I will share my story soon, but going on that hike and the anticipation, because I knew I needed to tell you who I am, where I come from, what my life has looked like, and the things that I'm currently in the middle of battling. And I remember Clinton, a good friend of mine, was here, and I told him, I said, hey, man, we're going on a hike, and I'm about to tell her everything. He's like, really? That's good, man, because you really like her. You need to like tell her everything. It was very hard, but it was also very freeing. And I knew it needed to be done. But the way you handled it, Wendy, was just incredible. You know, I basically had just bared my soul and told you a lot of my failures and, you know, just a lot of the stuff that you typically don't open up and share with everybody, right? And I said, well, this is your opportunity to run if you're going to run. And if you don't call me, I completely understand. And what did you say? You said, I'm not going anywhere. Yeah. And that was amazing.
Yeah. I remember he opened up and at the end he gave me that option, like, okay, like that's my story, folks. And just like in that moment, because I could tell it was sacred, and any of our journeys that any of us have been through, when the Lord allows us to open and be comfortable enough to share with anybody, like to be that raw and that broken. I just remember also being like, I'm not going anywhere. Like, wow, he just entrusted me with a lot. And funny enough, it was after date number 2. So we had already had our first kiss, but it was fairly new in the relationship. So it's not like I knew I liked this man. I just hadn't had that 100% confirmation of like, he's going to be my forever person. Mm-hmm. And by you opening up, gave me the opportunity to be like, okay, Lord, I'm going to choose this, knowing everything that I know and know that you have a plan and a purpose to redeem our story together. Yeah. And we had already talked about so many things that led us to each other. And it's like, you cannot write our stories on paper and have it work out. No, like there's no reason it should. And yet our connection to each other and our connection to the Holy Spirit and the way that the Lord spoke to us individually, even through rainbows. Yeah. It was just like, just one thing after the next, continual confirmation of me being like, wow, I prayed. I didn't have a name to pray for 5 years ago, but I prayed very specific prayers that God highlighted and showed me that I was praying for Joshua at the same time. I didn't even know I was praying for Joshua, and just how beautiful that was. So.
Yeah. And one thing you spoke on a minute ago, Wendy, you were talking about the way that you would have to leave. You know, we'd meet each other for a little while, and then you'd have to leave for a long while. What I believe God did, that was almost a divine setup, because it allowed us to connect spirit to spirit and then soul to soul, because the physical attraction was definitely there, but it wasn't the foundation. And I think, you know, a lot of time when people are dating, they let the physical attraction become the foundation, and that's shaky ground, right? Yeah. But the spirit, it was like our spirits were aligned, then our souls, our mind, our will, our emotions, and then obviously the physical. Yeah. But it was almost a divine setup. I really liked how God did that.
Yeah. Yeah. So trying to think about filling in the rest of the dots, because I'm sure you don't want to hear every single story of our dating life. But at one point, we had decided to connect with some of my prayer warriors in Evergreen for prayer, just over some things that we were going through individually and together as a couple, and things that we were facing, and just knowing that we wanted solid people of faith and connected to the Holy Spirit around us, cheering us on.
Those women are incredible, by the way.
And I've been praying with these women for, 15 years. And they're, side note, these women are in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, and they're praying over Evergreen for revival. And they've been doing that for 30 years. So I know that these are like powerhouse, like warrior women.
They're the real deal. Yeah.
And I remember it, like through our prayer time with them, and then even afterwards, they're like, praise God for a hailstorm.
That's right. Yeah.
Because a hailstorm is truly what led us together. And that was at the beginning of November. We continued to date, continued to just really share our hearts. You know, we didn't have a typical dating experience where we were like, oh, let's go to Top Golf and then maybe talk for 10 minutes. And then let's go bowling with a bunch of friends and then maybe talk for real for 10 minutes. It's like every single time we got together, we were sharing parts of our heart and parts of our stories.
Fully engaged. Yeah.
Yeah. And we did have amazing dinners with friends, and we did get to go to each other's churches. And for me, when I knew that Joshua was somebody I wanted in my life forever, was the night that you picked me up from the airport and we drove straight to Lifegate for prayer and worship night. And we were talking the other day about how just like, it was like the Holy Spirit just breathed on that night. You know, I was scrubby from traveling for 8 hours and had a hat on, and just obviously you in the dating process, anybody that's listening knows you want to show up and be like, oh, I look good, especially as a female. But I was just like, you know what? This is who I am.
You did look good. You looked great.
And we went to prayer and worship that night, and it was just like God did something.
It was magical. It really was. The Holy Spirit was there. Just another plug for Lifegate. Their Wednesday nights are really, really great.
Yeah.
The Lord really shows up there. But yeah, that was a kind of a monumental shift in everything that night. I got to meet your mom.
Yeah.
Kathy. Yeah.
So Joshua picked me up from the airport, but then I still needed to get home. So she picked me up because she had my Jeep, and she picked me up from prayer night and got to meet Joshua. And and then it's like, we went from dating a couple times a week to, okay, let's be around each other for 5 days a week. And let's actually try to fully commit and see where God leads us. At this point, we're spending a lot more time together, and we knew holidays were coming, and you had just spent Thanksgiving with your family on the East Coast, and I was with my family, but we also knew that we wanted to do Christmas and New Year's together. And I had told Joshua that some of my very best friends in the entire world lived in California because I had lived there for so long. And it was kind of under the context of like, hey, if we're going to do this for the long haul, you've got to meet my best friends.
You got to meet them. They got to check you out.
Yeah.
That's right. And every time you spoke about California, you just got the sparkle in your eyes. And so I knew it was a very special place for you. California girl at heart.
Definitely. Most people think I'm from California, which is kind of funny. So we decided to go to California for a long weekend to meet some of my very best friends from 20 years ago. Biola, shout out to Biola University. And what's funny is that I was assuming that we were just going to go in for the weekend. We're going to get to meet and hang out with my best friends for a couple days and hopefully have some sunshine and beach time. And Joshua had a different plan.
A little bit different agenda. Yeah. I had been working with Charla to basically find out what type of ring you liked. I knew very quickly that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with you. And there's like big decisions in your life. And sometimes it'll come with anxiety, questions, confusions, sometimes even fear. I never had any of that. I had perfect peace that this was it.
Yeah. And
God had definitely brought you into my life. And so I was working on getting a ring. I had actually met with her dad, Leon, and got his blessing to ask you to marry me. Mm-hmm. And yeah, we're going to California in my head for a whole different reason.
And it's like I giggle like a giddy schoolgirl because it still makes me blush. I will say what Joshua just said about like that perfect peace. And it was, again, like we say, you can't make up our story on paper and have it work out. And yet, even when he shared his story with me and more of it would come out, you know, every time we spent time together, I always had that perfect peace. It was like, not once was I thinking go the other direction. It's like God just really covered that. So that's, to anybody listening, that's like another way to, you know, follow God's peace. And if you do not have peace in a situation, I would heed that. And especially when it comes to someone you're dating.
Yeah. Let peace be your umpire.
Yeah.
That's what my mom always says.
Yeah. That's sweet. Okay. So we fly to California. I'm excited to spend time with some of my girlfriends and their husbands and their families. And we get off the plane and the rental car that we had is like half a mile away.
We decided to go with a little sporty BMW convertible, kind of fitting for Southern California.
So fun. And we get to the rental car and realize it's too small to fit like all of our luggage in it. So I had to take an Uber. But at the same time, we're packing our luggage in.
I'm trying to see how I can make all this luggage fit in this tiny little trunk.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I'm like, where's my wallet? So I start checking my pockets, checking my backpack. I was so focused on the plane because that backpack had that huge diamond in it.
Yeah.
So that's my main focus. I'm like, can't let anybody grab that. I got to make sure I get this. I left my wallet behind the seat in front of me in the airplane.
Oh my gosh.
And this is what, like 30, 40 minutes after we've got off the plane.
So of course we're at this point not even thinking, oh, we're going to make dinner reservations. We're just thinking, how do we get this wallet back? Yeah. And like, please don't let it destroy the whole weekend.
I'm thinking, can I even fly back to Denver?
Without an ID, which is so wild. So we both get on the phone. We call different people. Like he calls Southwest. I call the airport. And we eventually, good news, we did get the wallet back and it had all of his cash in it, which is amazing.
That was another thing. I saw the way you intervened and took control of that situation. She literally stopped the plane from going to Vegas, guys. It was awesome.
And then we tried to bless the Southwest girls for helping. And we went to dinner that night and it was a wonderful evening of just being chill and low key and not having to worry about driving across town in Southern California, which can take a minute. And unfortunately, Joshua got some type of bad piece of chicken or something and spent the whole night?
Pretty much the entire evening in the restroom. Yeah. It was a lot of fun.
It was so bad.
And I'm sitting there thinking, no way, Satan, you are not going to take this one.
Yeah.
You're not going to take this one.
Yeah. Okay. So that's Friday. So Saturday, gorgeous weather. Absolutely gorgeous weather. And you guys in December in California, which we experienced this. So Saturday was gorgeous, like 78 degrees, not a cloud in the sky. And Sunday happened to be like super drizzly. The rain was like sitting in the air and it was dark and gloomy. Well, Saturday, we're like, let's go to the beach. This is going to be a gorgeous day to get to the beach. And
it was the perfect day. Literally like 70 degrees, probably not a cloud in the sky. Little ocean breeze, it was what you think of when you think of Southern California. Yeah.
So we take the BMW drop top, sport car down Poppy Street in Newport, and it's gorgeous weather. The top is down, so we're enjoying the air, and we park to go down to the beach. And he brings his backpack, and I'm thinking, oh, I guess I'll bring my waters and let's go look at the view. So we're at the view on Poppy Street that looks over towards the Wedge in Newport where the boats come in. And Joshua tells me to put my stuff down on the bench and is like, hey, I have a question for you.
Yeah. So I, while she's getting situated, putting her water bottles down, I'm getting the ring out of my backpack, hoping you don't see me. And it's funny, in one of those pictures, you can actually see me getting it, right? And so I'm getting the ring and I just right there at that lookout point, I said, hey, I need to ask you a question.
Which is so funny and we still do this to this day. We're like, hey, do you still love me? Or I have a question for you. Do you love me? Yeah. And just playful. So I kind of thought that's what he was doing. Yeah.
But you noticed me taking my sunglasses off too. So you knew it was a little different.
So I kind of was looking at him going, well, his sunglasses are off, but he just said, I have a question for you. And I'm thinking, I have no idea what he's going to, literally none, no suspicion.
That's awesome.
I had no clue that he had just taken my dad to lunch earlier that week. Literally didn't have a clue. I was thinking about our plans with our friends.
Yeah.
And he starts to drop to one knee and I freak out. I'm he does say, will you marry me? And
she literally tells me no. She's like, no. Wendy's a planner, if you guys don't know. So she is very organized and structured. And she's like, no, this isn't supposed to happen now.
Well, and I'm trying to convince myself because what we had actually talked about like previous weeks in Colorado was how we were going to spend Christmas with his family in Tennessee. And then New Year's, we were trying to figure out if we were going to go somewhere. We were maybe going to go visit another friend of his in Northern California. And Joshua actually said something like, let's look at rings after Christmas.
Right.
And so you guys, that should have been a dead giveaway for me to be like, he's got something planned. But I just assumed, it'll all happen after Christmas. So by me saying, no, this is not happening, my hand is shaking like I'm trying to fan myself off. Yeah. And I'm going, in my head, I'm just trying to calculate how, oh my gosh, this is like, wait a minute, we talked about December. Like,
you were so blown away. It was amazing.
And of course, he's sitting there on one knee going like on concrete, like looking up at me going, is that a, like, is that a yes? And of course I say yes. And I'm totally shaking. And he stands up and we embrace and he puts the ring on my hand. And it's funny because I don't know that he had planned this moment, with lots of other spectators or anything, but we're like, oh my gosh, it's just us two. And we need a picture to celebrate the moment at least. And there was this woman that was like 10 or 15 feet away, just potentially on a walk, but she was paused. And so we're like, hey, do you mind taking a picture for us? We just got engaged.
She had to have been an angel, honestly.
She really did. Like, she was in athletic clothes, which is probably normal for Southern California, but we ended up having things in common. Like, she had a sister that lives in Littleton, which is kind of where I grew up. And then they had been to Buena Vista, which is where a space that Joshua really enjoys. So she had all this Colorado knowledge and she literally took the perfect pictures for us.
The best pictures, guys. Unreal. It looks professional.
Yeah. Yeah. So she took pictures for us, like a dozen, and we got to pick the ones that we enjoyed and enjoyed the rest of the weekend. And I don't need to go into all the details, but we got to surprise my best friends. We got to surprise both of them and just spent the whole weekend laughing and telling stories and playing. And it was the perfect start to the holidays. And it's like a dream come true. And then you think about every single thing that the Lord did to bring us to such a time as now and everything that he had to write and weave in and through our lives. And we had gotten to experience this fall of God bringing out old situations that he was redeeming and just pointing into both of our lives going, you lived a lifetime, but I prepared you for this. And I prepared this person for you. And we've had moments where we've just been like, I waited my whole life for you. And I went through all of my junk just to bring me to a place now where I'd be ready to meet you. Yeah. So the engagement story was super fun. And I don't know if there's anything else you want to add in there, but
it's just a big God thing, right? Yeah. The timing of it all, the hope deferred, wondering, is it ever going to happen?
Yeah.
Are you going to be alone the rest of your life? Is that person out there? And then also having these incredibly high standards that people can't really, measure up to. It doesn't seem like you wonder if it's even possible, but then finding that person. And it's really great.
Yeah. So we love telling our story just because it is that we lived for so long in that ellipsis of hope deferred. And those that are tuning in that don't know the verse of a hope deferred makes the heart grow sick. And then it says, but a longing fulfilled is the tree of life. And we just lived in that in-between moment, hence the places between. We talk a lot about how do you transition from one season of life to the next. And when we're transitioning from one season of life to the next, we don't always feel like God has a plan at work behind the scenes. And I've heard enough stories and experienced enough that I've seen God deliver and redeem and step in so many times that we just absolutely believe that this is one of those, this is a longing fulfilled. And it sucked royally to have to wait as long as we did. And at the same time, I don't think either one of us would choose anything different where we're just like, it led me to you.
Yeah.
So I just think about people that are listening right now that are in that ellipsis of the hope deferred. And I just want to encourage you, whether you're single or in a relationship and just wondering where God is working. I just want to say to you that he sees you. He knows exactly where you're at, and he's always working behind the scenes. And if you choose to open your hands of surrender to ask him to get involved in your life and to trust him with the timing. I prayed with one of my best girlfriends, Susanna, really since 2017. She would be like, God, bring him hastily, like bring him now. And that was 2018. I didn't know that I could survive another 6 years.
Yeah.
And I just know that God has beautiful, perfect timing for what he does in our stories and in our lives. And I had another friend and mentor once tell me, if you want something tailor-made takes time.
That's right.
And I've always said, I want my life to shout of God's goodness and how people can look and say, there is no way but God. And we just both feel like this is one of those stories.
Yeah.
So
yes, in that waiting, you can question. Your faith can get low, right?
Yeah.
But just a reminder that God is good and he is faithful. It's not the end of the story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So you guys, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for just being awesome cheerleaders, even within my own life and the places between the journey. And I'm excited for what season 4 has for you to tune into. We have some incredible testimonies.
Yeah, it's going to be good.
And I'm also excited that Joshua is going to be more a part of the places between, and hopefully we'll get to guest interview with some other couples. And honestly, I'm so excited to see what is in store for the places between, and having you guys tune in week and week out, and the potential of more retreats to come and powerful stories, and just know that like God is continually working behind the scenes just to gloriously show up and show off. So we love you and pray that you have an incredible week ahead, and can't wait to chat again and share more of our story to come. But we just wanted to start with a little bit of just how we met, how we got engaged, all the good things, just knowing that God is so faithful. So he's faithful to finish the work he's begun.
Yep. Season 4 is going to be great, guys. Keep listening.
I'm over here cheering you on, friend. You just finished another episode of the Places Between podcast. If you want to access more, be sure to subscribe or visit theplacesbetween.com to learn more about our guests, episode sponsors, upcoming retreats, and more. Like Stay in the Story, a 25-day devotional all about staying in your story while you wait on your dreams, on God, and on life to come to fruition. And lastly, if you're looking for an online community of people who also want to transition well, then come say hi over on Instagram at The Places Between. As always, thanks for taking time to dive into the places between. Until next time, keep enjoying that journey.